Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am calling the meeting of the Governance Committee to order. It is Monday, February 9th at 2:31 p.m. Diego, will you please call the roll?
Good afternoon. Dunphy.
Here.
Hurtle-Guiney.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Koyama Lane.
Here. Ashley, will you please read the statement of conduct?
Welcome to the meeting of the Governance Committee. To testify before this committee in person or virtually, you must sign up in advance at the committee agenda at www.portland.gov/council/agenda/governance committee or by calling 311. Information on engaging with this committee can be found at this link. Registration for virtual testimony closes 1 hour prior meeting. In-person testifiers must sign up before the agenda item is heard. In public, testimony will be taken on an item. Individuals must testify for 3 minutes unless the chair states otherwise. Your microphone will be muted when your time is over. The chair preserves order. Destructive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, interrupting others' testimony or committee deliberation will not be allowed. If you're cause destruction, a warning will be given. Further destruction will result in ejection from the meeting. Everyone who fails to leave once ejected is subject for trespass. Additionally, the committee might take a short recess and reconvene virtually. Your testimony should address the matter being considered. When testifying, state your name for the record. If you're a lobbyist, identify the organization you represent. Virtual testifiers should unmute themselves when the clerk calls their name. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. In today's meeting, our Governance Committee will hear general public testimony, if we have any, hear from the City Auditor's Office on a proposed ordinance to amend City Code Chapter 2.10 to permit the auditor to enforce the city's campaign finance regulations, and also hear from Councilor Hurtle-Guiney on a proposed ordinance to amend City Code Chapter 3.02 on council organization and procedure. Before we get into the meeting, Vice Chair Ryan, do you have any opening remarks? Nope. All right. Clerk, will you please read the first item?
Item 1, December 8th through 15th, 2025 Governance Committee Minutes.
This first agenda item is the approval of the committee minutes for the Governance Committee. The committee is held in December. These minutes are available online as part of the meeting agenda. If there is no objection, the minutes will be approved by unanimous consent. Hearing no objection, the minutes are approved. Diego, will you please read the next item?
Item 2, Public Testimony on Governance Issues.
Diego, do we have any members of the public signed up to provide testimony?
We do. We have Terry Harris.
Thanks for being here today, Mr. Harris.
Actually, I thought I was signed up for the last item and not this one, so I'm not sure if that's correct. But given the opportunity, I will always take it. I hope I'm signed up for later because I do have something to say there. I'll just say what I hope is coming along with on the 3.02 is your effort for a committee of the whole. And I hope that's on your radar. And if it's on your radar, that's all I'd ask at this point. All right, thanks.
That concludes testimony.
Great. Diego, can you please read the next item?
Item 3, Amend Campaign Finance Code to maintain enforcement of voter-approved regulations following court order. Amend Code Chapter 2.10.
Great. Thank you for being here with us today. In October of last year, the City Auditor's Office alerted us that because of a recent court ruling, the city needed to make changes to our campaign finance code. The City Auditor's Office gathered feedback from legal experts, community organizations, and other stakeholders in order to come up with these recommendations. And today we're reviewing the ordinance brought forward by the City Auditor's Office based on these recommendations. So we have Deborah Scroggin, did I say your name? Scroggin, Elections Division Manager, and Reed Broderson. Did I get that right? Broderson, just failing here, Chief Deputy City Auditor with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Chair Coyam-Elaine. Appreciate your time, councilors. My name is Reed Broderson, Chief Deputy Auditor with the Auditor's Office. Here today on behalf of Auditor Simone Reddy to introduce this item. I think you gave a great summary, Chair Coyam-Elaine, so I won't repeat it. And I will just pass it over to Elections Manager Deborah Scroggin to get us in the weeds.
Hello, good afternoon, Governance Committee members. My name is Deborah Scroggin, City Elections Division Manager within the Auditor's Office, and I'm here to overview our campaign finance proposed code amendments. Please feel free to interrupt as we go along for any technical points of clarification you may have, and then we'll take any larger questions toward the end. Next slide. Before we dive in, a brief background about these specific city charter-based campaign finance regulations. These regulations were proposed and approved by voters in 2018, and due to legal and court proceedings, they were not in effect until mid-2020, after some portions were ruled unconstitutional. And as a side note, in addition to today's proposal, we included a housekeeping effort in our amendment. You'll see additional strikeouts of areas of the code previously deemed unconstitutional and not in effect. We worked with the City Attorney's Office on this. And the goal is for public clarity. The main components that are in effect right now are limits on campaign contributions and their sources, and disclosures required on most candidate campaign communications, also known commonly as paid-for buys. An important and often confused component is oversight of these regulations. So just to be clear, the charter requires oversight by the city auditor, a separate office that oversees the optional publicly financed campaign program, Small Donor Elections, is overseen by the city administrator. Today's proposal has nothing to do with Small Donor Elections oversight or how that program functions. Our offices do work closely together, and the regulations are linked in some ways. Probably the biggest example is, according to charter, candidates that opt into Small Donor Elections financing can receive any amount that program allows it to receive. So those are the regulations that we're talking about here today. Next slide. Why are we here? In July of last year, Multnomah County Circuit Court held that the enforcement procedures in these regulations are unconstitutional. The court's order stems from litigation from the 2024 election cycle when the Auditor's Office received an appeal on 2 of our decisions. The litigation exposed longstanding vulnerabilities in our regulations as violations of the Due Process Clause of the U.S. Constitution. You may recall we engaged counselors this past fall following that court order, and we're here today to ask this committee to act on these issues the court identified. They are a lack of hearing on the city's decision and the fact that the overall short investigatory timeframes really limit parties, candidates, campaigns, donors' ability to engage in the enforcement process. We're here with a proposal to address the court's decision and to ensure enforceability for 2026 and for future election cycles. So to be clear, this isn't about anything in the limits, the sources, or campaign communications. It's about how we enforce them. Next slide. Importantly, our code change offers continuity. It keeps most things the same. Contribution limits and disclosure requirements will not be touched. The program maintains transparency to the public while still requiring some of the most aggressive timelines in the nation for investigatory resolution. Lastly, public access to information remains the same after each preliminary decision we release. Next slide. This proposal addresses the court concerns with 2 clear changes, adding an appeal hearing process and slightly extended timelines for reviewing complaints. These amendments both insert the due process provisions in the spirit of the court's ruling and allow for continued lawful enforcement of what voters adopted. It does this by first adding an administrative appeal process to a neutral hearings officer. Second, adding a slightly extended timeframe to provide thorough complaint response, review of evidence, engaging parties, and planning for that investigation stage. The proposal does include discretion for the auditor in certain limited circumstances to extend the timeframe, which we'll get into. Next slide, please. The first major change is the ability to appeal before an administrative hearings officer, which doesn't currently exist. Before we discuss this addition, a brief overview of our complaint process is you'll see here, required in charter as is, we receive a complaint. We must immediately send a notice to involved parties. We then investigate. A decision is released, which goes to an appropriate state court without a hearing. The added step here is, as you can see, an appeal request opportunity, hearing, and final order process with an evidentiary aspect. And the hearings officer would rule, and then the appeal process would continue to an appropriate state court should the appellant wish to do so. This is in alignment with other city decisions you may be familiar with that are heard on appeal by a hearings officer. Next slide, please. So this is a straightforward appeal right that offers timely, neutral arbiters to our enforcement provisions. Under the standard time frame, an appellant has 90 total days, and within that time frame, requests an appeal, has a hearing, and receives a final order. Elections is currently in discussion with the Oregon Office of Administrative Hearings to conduct this service. There is discretion to request an expedited time frame, such as if we're close to an election, or if, for example, a case involves multiple candidates. These procedures will also be in rule for the public. As for fiscal impact, we estimate currently about $15,000 per election cycle to pay for this service. Again, this is the kind of appeal process that already exists in the city, and the preliminary decision that we issue will still be available to the public consistently to provide that transparency to voters. Next slide, please. The second aspect of the proposed amendment is a slight adjustment to investigatory timelines. This was alluded to by the court because they are aggressive, not flexible, and often complicate engagement in the investigation and then jeopardize due process. Here's what our current timeframe looks like. In general, we have 2 business days to receive, review, and send out notifications to subjects of the complaint and the complainant. We then have 20 business days to review and collect information, conduct interviews, and draft a decision. That's the top timeline here on the screen and represents what the process currently looks like. The finding is then appealable to circuit court. Inside of an election, defined currently as within 30 calendar days, this all changes and timeframes are halved, as shown in the bottom part of the screen. That means within 1 business day, we send notices. After 10 business days, we must complete the entire investigation and draft a decision. This is a very aggressive timeframe. And importantly, it's a timeframe that extremely limits the ability of parties to engage in our process. Next slide, please. Our proposal eliminates these expedited timelines for the following reasons. With one timeline, we would have consistency across the election cycle. The expedited timeframes were a significant outlier when we looked at pure jurisdictions and their enforcement of campaign finance. And removing the expedited timeline protects everyone involved and their ability to respond and participate in the investigation. Next slide. In addition to removing that expedited timeframe, we're proposing to add time for a sufficiency review to intake complaints and plan for investigations as needed. Otherwise, the timeframe stays the same. What exactly is a sufficiency review? It allows the office to intake a complaint and review it and available public information for relevancy, completeness, and viability to move toward an investigation. So it gives us time to see, is this a real complaint if everything alleged is true? Why are we adding it? To address tight timelines referenced by the court and allow meaningful review, investigation planning so that we can let everyone participate meaningfully. During this time, we can refer it to another agency, we can dismiss the complaint, all reducing the likelihood of weaponization of the process. Currently, our notices go out immediately, and we have no mechanism to avoid complaints that are known to be frivolous. This review process allows us to stop a frivolous complaint before it can be weaponized. Lastly, adding a sufficiency review helps us avoid costly withdrawn and reissued determinations. We've unfortunately had to do this in the past due to lack of time to engage parties and receive and review complete information. This additional time is strongly recommended to avoid these situations, which can also damage public trust in our process. Next slide. So here's what the proposed timeline looks like, adding in that sufficiency review. And as a note, we're switching to all calendar days in the proposal to make things clear for the public. You'll see that the total additional time is 12 days for a sufficiency review compared to the current standard. This results in 22 business days currently versus 44 calendar days proposed. All parties are still noticed, and our preliminary finding is available to the public following the investigation. Next slide. And here's an overview of the 2 proposed amendments that we're suggesting in blue, an appeal process and an adjusted timeline. Stepping back and looking at what that means for the life of a complaint, the complaint is received, we conduct a sufficiency review, and then we notify the parties involved, and then we investigate. When a preliminary decision is released, we publish it, and the appeal process can begin. These components address the court's concerns and allow all parties to engage meaningfully and for our office to be responsive to candidates and the public. It allows for folks to appeal and also contest the evidence. Taken together, these additions maintain an aggressive timeline for resolution of a complaint while adding in due process procedures throughout. They also bring the Elections Division closer in line with leading national practices in campaign finance enforcement. Next slide, please. However, some cases do require discretion for review of unique or complex allegations and available information. In these cases, and in line with national norms, there is auditor discretion in the proposal to extend deadlines for good cause in the public interest. We will also propose these in a public rulemaking process. Some examples of these limited but important situations requiring our discretion are case complexity. Cases have previously involved thousands of pages of documents and dozens of spreadsheets to collect, analyze, and review for potential violations. Our dependency on partner elections agencies to consider interpretations, advice, and receive factual information we may request. This can take some time during an election. Sending folks notice by mail when we have no other means of communication for them means that the whole process may be slowed down a bit. This is common in campaign finance investigations involving donors specifically, and we've had the situation where we've had to mail dozens of notices and questions in a case by certified mail, and this takes time. We need to ensure that everyone is aware of the complaint and how they're able to have a voice in it. With an increased number of candidates as well, positions on the ballot, and finite staff resources, we may need discretion to extend timelines so that all the parties can engage in the process. And again, we would be bound by the criteria and administrative rule when employing this discretion, and we'd be required to let all parties know about any changes to the timeline. Last slide, please. So to finish up here, we're requesting that you move this proposal forward to ensure enforceability of these voter-approved regulations with added due process. Taken together, these address the court's concerns and maintain voter intent. We're upholding the transparency built into this regulation while improving fairness for alleged violators. Should the committee move this proposal forward, we would then present to the full council and look forward to engaging election stakeholders in a public rulemaking process, should it pass. Next slide. If you have any questions, we're happy to take them. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I don't think we have public testimony, do we, Diego?
No one signed up.
Okay. Great, so colleagues, let's move into Q&A and deliberation. Councilor Purtle-Guinea.
Thank you very much, Chair. 2 questions. The investigation timeline, not the compressed timeline when we're close to an election, but the regular timeline. It looks like currently you have 20 days and this expands that to 30 days. With the sufficiency review, are we adding more things to the investigation step, or is that just a true expansion of the time that your staff have to complete the investigation?
The current time frame is 20 business days, and we're adding, our investigation timeline is proposed for 30 calendar days. Correct.
Okay, so we're talking about roughly the same amount of time, just naming it differently. I just didn't catch that.
Exactly, just a translation from calendar to business. Yeah.
Okay. And you're asking us to add a new discretion to allow you to expand it. Have you had cases in the past where you would have benefited from more time, or is that could be a problem at some point concern?
We have absolutely had that problem.
Is it a significant number of cases? I just want to understand if we're adding discretion that doesn't have a cap on it. Is this something that you would need to use a lot, where we're actually better off expanding the investigation period so that there's still that cap and the public knows what to expect? Or is this something that's very rare? Help place that in context for me.
Thank you, Counselor. I think that with the added sufficiency review process, we would have less need potentially to use that discretion. But it has been, I would say, potentially a third of our cases, we would have benefited from additional time and working with the parties to figure out what that means.
And if I may, Counselor, thank you for the question. I think it doesn't matter as frequently as it matters in depth. So when we need it, it really does matter. And I think the cases that went to court were ones where it would have mattered. And cases where we've had to issue a determination and reissue one or reopen an investigation are other examples where we really just needed more time, in many cases, to engage with the parties themselves so they could get the proper documentation in order, get the interviews done, and allow us to review that evidence. So I think from the court's perspective, I don't want to speak for them entirely, but what gets lost when we can't extend is often those due process considerations we're really trying to protect.
So from our perspective, I'm thinking about worst case scenario as we approve this, and it's not a deep concern, but we approve this and then suddenly everything is running over and the public doesn't know what to expect. What I'm trying to get at is, do you expect this to happen often enough that we should actually extend your timeline and maybe limit the cases in which you can use that discretion? Will the discretion not be used very often? Do we need an outer limit on it? Or do you think that we will be in a situation where we will have no regrets because there won't be issues of that being used regularly and creating a lack of certainty for Portlanders that things will be investigated quickly?
We certainly tried to take a narrow approach to this proposal to make as few changes as possible. So we would also be able to try this for an election cycle. And if the council was unhappy with how it was working, we could come back and review it as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councilor Pertolini asked a lot of the questions that I was coming up with, so I'm trying to not ask them again, or if I do ask them, it's because I either couldn't figure out if you answered it in a way that I can understand, or if we just need to take a little bit more time with it. But first, I want to thank you both. This is really important work that you're doing. And big picture, I also think how important this is, because the relationship between the small donor office and the auditor's office elections continues to need just more clarity on what the roles are. That's not a statement against anything that's happening. We've been building something quickly in the small donor office. And then how does that communicate with your office? And where are those checks and balances? And from someone that participated in it, sometimes that was confusing as well. So I think all of us now have that experience. I've had it 3 times. And so I think we need to continue to stay focused on this. And when the small donor office sometimes felt like it was in the role of being the decision maker, it seemed like it was not offering the proper checks and balances. So I want to thank the auditor's office for leaning in here. Were you satisfied with when Councilor Pertolini, when it's off election cycle, this is easy peasy, right? When this is during the elections and everyone is working at a fast pace and they expect everyone else around them to be operating that same way, the life of a candidate, and no one is, so you're kind of in your own little orbit. But I think that I can't tell right now if this will provide the urgency that's still needed when there's something that's preventing, say, a candidate from suddenly being in jail for raising money because they're under investigation, or I can't tell if this will allow satisfaction to be experienced from those running for office in terms of doing both more thorough work than I think we could do if we just kept it in one office, but if that checks and balances still provides that urgency. And so I know you were getting at that, but I still can't, I want to hear more. And we're going to know more once this happens again. You always learn by doing, so there's always, but we've had enough examples now where this could be written in a way today that it couldn't have been written a few years ago. Mm-hmm. What do you want to tell me about this journey of trying to provide both the checks and balances and the urgency?
I would, thank you, Councilor. I would just note that we always use our professional discretion in looking at which cases need all of our attention to jump in and act on. However, some of these timelines don't allow for the folks that are subject to the regulations to participate meaningfully. So we're trying to continually balance that. And this proposal allows us to do that with a little bit more discretion, to look at those cases that are really complex and look at those cases that are a little simpler, that we can move faster.
Yeah, I think to add to that, Councilor, thank you for the question. I think you're definitely putting your finger on the pulse of what's a challenge here, right? There are
I'm trying to define the problem, and then I want to see that this is definitely a solution towards it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do think ultimately the drafters of this law, the voters, we all had to consider, right, how we balance timeliness and fairness, among other things. And I think what we're hearing here is the court is saying, you balanced it wrong, and you need more fairness. And I think what we're trying to do is, say, okay, sure, let's build in due process. And then to Deborah's point, when we can move faster and make sure candidates have that clarity and the public has that clarity. I will also, say we are an important part of the enforcement ecosystem, but we're not alone. So oftentimes what we're using is also public data in ORSTAR, for example. And so candidates, the media, others in that sphere can also use that information to talk about, their alleged violation. So, but again, I think right now we're really trying to meet a narrow need of the court to rebalance a little bit how this law was drafted.
And I'll just add, Counselor, that we did look at how other jurisdictions balance that across the country and in this state and in other jurisdictions that have similar regulations. And this is by far one of the most aggressive timelines that we've seen.
Okay. What are some of the examples of where you looked? I believe you. I just want to hear.
Absolutely. So the state of Arizona has a very similar regulation with complex double disclosure on voter communications and campaign contributions and limit regulations. And theirs is 180 days for total resolution of a complaint. The state of Oregon recently passed campaign finance. It's not in effect yet, but theirs is 60 days. And if you look at local jurisdictions, we have ethics commissions usually oversee those in cities. So Oakland, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, these jurisdictions don't have timelines because this area of regulation is incredibly complex.
That helped, Deborah. Thank you for always doing that type of thorough work. So what are some of the reasons or guidelines an auditor would use to make that determination of when to extend the timelines?
I provided some of those. Do you want some clarity on some of them, or do you want me just to repeat them? So we would do those in rule, just to be clear, so that the public would have a say in what those are and would understand why we're proposing them and in what situations. We would also be notifying all the parties involved that we were extending a timeline when we do so. That's in the proposed code. But some of the examples that we gave are, for example, we had to do this in a case where we had to notify folks by mail because ORSTAR only has addresses, right? And candidates don't always know who their donors are, emails. So that's a situation in which things are slowed down by potentially a week. And we want to make sure that these folks know they're subject to a complaint and how they can be involved. Another example is when we get thousands of pages of documentation or have to review many videos and organize interviews. These are really situations where we want to be careful and get it right.
And I realize we're doing a first reading today. This is a first reading. It's an ordinance, right? So we'll discuss it today and then vote on it next time.
We can vote on it.
Oh, that's right. I didn't win that one.
That's in full council.
I wish that codes would have more process than that in committee. But anyway, say this gets to the full council. When will this then be formalized and publicly available? Because we're in an election season, because it's 2026.
We will move, again, balancing public interest in our process with how quickly we need to move with the election. But that's why we're here today to try to get that process going. We hope to be at council in early March, if possible, and then immediately starting a rulemaking process as soon as it's passed.
So I think the goal would be to have rules in place in April, so we can make sure.
April?
Yeah, at least posted. We want to make sure that our staff are trained and our materials are up to date so that candidates have the right information as they start to engage.
Yeah, that was helpful. And I thank you for providing some sort of a guideline of where this is going and expectation. I just want to say I'm really pleased to see that the code is getting the fixes needed to have due process, and specifically grateful that there will be an appeal process for those who are accused of violations. So I think this is definitely a step in the right direction. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Looking to see if anyone else has questions.
Do you need a motion to move this?
Yes, I would entertain a motion to move this ordinance to full council with a due pass recommendation.
I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
The motion has been moved by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Dunphy. Any further discussion? Right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Dunphy,
Aye.
Bertolini,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Koyama Lane.
Aye.
With 5 ayes, the motion carries, and the ordinance document number 2026-055 will move to the full council with a do pass recommendation.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Diego, will you please read the next item?
Item 4, amend council organization and procedure code, amend code chapter 3.02.
Wonderful. I'm going to hand things over to Councillor Bertolini as the sponsor of this item, who has prepared a presentation for us.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair, for the permission to bring a presentation forward today. I think that, oh, perfect, we have it up. Wonderful. And colleagues, I will start by just noting that you received a memo with some of this information late last week. That memo is posted online so that it's available to members of the public. It goes through at a high level some of the information that I will jump into today. I want to begin before we get into the depths of the presentation by thanking all of you, because last fall, I brought forward a draft of these proposals as a discussion document so that we could start to dig into some of these pieces, and was able to get a lot of feedback that was helpful in thinking about how I brought forward something for us to consider in a more formal way and then to move on to full council. So what we have before us are some amendments to Chapter 3.02 of Portland City Code based on feedback I received when I was council president from some of our colleagues and some of the things that I saw in terms of how our procedures were working well and how they weren't, based on feedback from our clerk and other supporting staff offices about places where there were perhaps inconsistencies in the code, based on conversations with my then council vice president about things we were seeing that maybe weren't totally clear in the code around how we would operate and how things moved through procedures, and compiled those all to bring together. So I'll just back us up a little bit. In January of 2025, over a year ago, council unanimously adopted Emergency Ordinance 19-2021, which updated our governance provisions. And one part of the ordinance was that the council president bring forward a proposal to replace or extend Chapter 3.02 by the end of October. Because of a number of things that flew our way, including responding to the federal government, I didn't quite have that done by the end of October, but we passed an emergency ordinance at full council, allowing for a little bit of extra time for me to bring this forward. We then reviewed that draft document in governance in November of that year, and in December, I submitted this draft ordinance to the governance committee. I apologize, Council President Dunphy, if it's a little bit awkward that I'm bringing these forward now that you're in that chair, but there's some history here we're catching up on. Sure. So the first set of changes before us today are around committee timelines and actions, how our committees work. And the goal is twofold: strengthen the committee's role in shaping policy by ensuring that committees see items in a timely manner. Right now, there are no code requirements on when committees take up items that have been referred to them. Set clear actions, or set a clear list of actions that committees can take. Right now, there is not a list of clear actions that committees can take when something is brought before them. And ensure that those actions give clear signals to the full council on what the committee's intentions were in moving that policy. One of the things that I took from a number of discussions with our colleagues over the last year was that there was not a lot of clarity around the work that committees do. There was a sense that things could languish in committee, But there was, though I don't think, unanimous commitment, strong commitment to doing the bulk of that dig in and iterate work that we do in committees. Committees were a test for us. We didn't know at the start of last year what we were going to think. I think there's still some divisions, as we've heard, about how committees should be used. But we've continued to use committees as a place to iterate on our work and trying to establish that in a way that allows committees to do that work and then send clear signals to full council about what their recommendations are. We want everyone to be able to interpret committees' signals in a way that makes sense and have them be reliable. Items without a recommendation, without committee consideration or amendment consideration come to council and cause us to have to spend more time on those things in full council that perhaps should have been worked out in committee. There will always be changes we need to make when we're all 12 in the room, but the basics should be worked through. This section is predominantly small changes. The amendment clearly defines, like I said, the actions a committee can take on an item. It says that committees may move forward an item to full council with a due pass recommendation, may refer an item to another committee for additional work if it's something that perhaps was sent to a committee but needs the input of counselors who are looking at a different topic. That can happen with or without recommendation, the movement to another committee, or that committees may vote not to advance an item and to hold it in committee, either for later consideration or for any other reason. Obviously, committees can consider an item and choose not to vote at all as well. The second section of what I've brought forward today is around inactive items. And this is a place where the former council vice president, our chair, and I have had a lot of discussion. Because the way our system is currently set up, no items actually ever die, which means that for a year or two, we're okay. But we don't have sessions like some other legislative bodies where things automatically die at the end of a session. 10 years from now, you can imagine the clerk's docket of items sitting there that we chose not to vote on, not to move, not to do anything with, that are still just sitting on the docket. And nobody knows why. So we set up in this second section what inactive items actually are. Everyone who has access to eCouncil can see now these handful of items that sit in the queue. The public sees them listed on committee pages as within that committee, but there's no signaling to the public that we don't actually ever intend to pick that item back up again. There's in fact a few of those in this committee. One I brought forward very early on, and after significant discussion here, it became clear that that wasn't the right direction for us to move. I had no way to formally pull that out of committee or to say, this is dead, it's not moving forward. So we established an inactivity standard for legislative items that adds transparency to the process and create a provision that if an item has not been advanced within 180 days from the full council, it is deemed inactive and removed from the legislative process unless it's formally resubmitted and starts anew. We also will parallel that in the committee process. The third section is a response to public testimony. And I want to specifically thank Terry Harris for his written testimony and for the time that he has put into analyzing this element of the proposal. I really appreciate the feedback. The testimony that we received reflected a deep understanding of municipal legislative procedure. As we on this committee all appreciate at this point in our service here, and provided helpful comparative examples from other jurisdictions. Mr. Harris raised concerns about the 180-day inactivity standard, including the administrative burden. I chose 180 days to provide flexibility of an extended runway. We know that there are times where we need to set something aside to do background work. And as we saw, for example, with the work around AI and its use in rental housing, that took a few months. So I wanted to give time for us to do extra work that was needed before something inadvertently became inactive or died too soon. But the intent is to provide transparency, and that's why we can't rely on a self-executing rule like that given to us by Robert's Rules. We need a formal rule that gives counselors a clear bookend and the public a clear sense of what is or isn't viable. The amendment establishes a baseline standard so that items don't remain indefinitely pending without action. I agree that this is an area where we need to do future refinement as we see how 180 days sits, as we see if that becomes a burden either because it's too soon or not soon enough. And I hope that council will revisit that in the future. The next item is the council handbook. And the third amendment that I bring forward formally establishes the council handbook as a tool of city council. Thanks to the work of our chair and former vice president, Councilor Koyama Lane, and her team, we have our first iteration of a handbook. And I hope that as we move forward, we build on that and continue to enshrine our norms and best practices in the handbook. This amendment adds handbook to our code and makes it a permanent fixture of our council and allows us to use it in ways that align with the normal cadence of our work. It gives us a standard for how often we should readopt it at a minimum, encouraging us to do that work of continual refinement, and also provides for an opportunity to refine it more often than that if that's needed. This should be an iterative piece of an iterative background piece to help all of us, to help the public, to help our new colleagues who might join some of us at this dais in the future. And it also should follow our normal timeline of when new people are here, when new committees are adopted, when new leadership is elected, to ensure that it fits with the direction that council is headed. The next piece is code amendments deadlines. And this is, I will admit, one of the more controversial pieces of what I'm bringing forward. It is also a piece that was in direct response to a few of our colleagues' frustration about amendments coming forward without time for counselors to properly vet them. Often when amendments are brought forward at the dais, we don't have time to understand their full impact because we don't have time to talk to people who might have perspectives we don't see. And there will always be emergencies. There will always be times where we need to do something immediate and at the dais. I also wanted to respect the work of committees in iterating by not giving us amendment deadlines for committees. This is the space where we're supposed to be able to talk to each other and say, you just brought up something I hadn't thought of. Why don't we think about an amendment to this? If we amend something in committee, there is time between when it passes out of committee and when it gets to full council to do the work of catching anything that went wrong, whether it is sending something through code review that was adopted from the dais and so it hadn't been through code review, whether it is getting feedback from stakeholders who didn't happen to be in the committee meeting but have concerns with an amendment that was added. The time between committee and council gives us space for that. But when we introduce amendments at the dais in full council, we miss out on those types of tools. And sometimes we add things that should have been through a full review and weren't able to be because of the timeline. I want to flag that, like with everything else, the restriction in code that I am proposing that amendments would have to be filed 24 hours in advance of a committee hearing could be overruled by a supermajority vote of the council. If we are sitting in a council meeting and realize that there is something that needs to be done that wasn't filed in advance, 9 counselors could suspend the rules, as they can with anything else, to allow an amendment to be received from the dais. This doesn't tie our hands on critical emergent issues. It also doesn't preclude the presiding officer from holding an item over if potential amendments are discussed that council wants to consider that there are not 9 votes to suspend the rules for, but which are an important part of the discussion. A presiding officer could hold an item over to the next meeting in order to allow those amendments to be filed. Council President, I don't take that lightly. I know firsthand how hard it is when things have to get held over and it messes up future agendas because you have things planned a few meetings out. But I do think having escape clauses, whether written or just known because it is part of the rules as they stand, are important, and that is one on this provision. Final passage on an item in all of these cases, and actually I should note in this case it wouldn't have to be moved to the next week. It could just be moved from a Wednesday morning to a Thursday afternoon agenda, because that's 24 hours later from the morning to the afternoon the next day. All of these pieces allow us to have more transparency, a more thorough vetting of the work that we do, but still allow us to iterate in committee, to pass something if there's an emergent issue with broad support, and to do our work. There is a technical revision in here as well. We use this package to clean up 3.02 by making a handful of changes, some grammatical, some technical, some to update pieces that are no longer relevant because they were only relevant when we were first seated. And those are included here as well. They are spelled out in more detail in the memo that was sent out late last week. So I'll just close by saying we've been at this for a little over a year now. We've seen a lot that works well in the rules that we adopted at the beginning of last year. We have seen some of our colleagues change their perspective on where we need to be heading. And what I've tried to do is compile the things that are the most problematic for getting our work done effectively, or that I've heard many of our colleagues raise as major concerns, while still keeping our original intent. There are many other changes that we could all bring forward to change the intent, but I tried for the most part to maintain what I thought was our original intent in trying out this iterative committee process, having some clear standards that allow us the flexibility to do our work and take our time at it, but still send clear signals to the public, improve transparency in the work that we do, and allow us to be clear with the public about what to expect from our body. I am happy to go into any of these pieces in more detail. I am going to pull up the memo that my team sent out as well to make sure that I have in front of me exactly what was sent to all of you. And I look forward to the discussion. Before we move into discussion, I do just want to give a thanks to my staff, Devin Mullins, who put this memo together and did a lot of work on the back end on these revisions. He spent a lot of time working with our attorneys, our clerk's office, and others to make sure that we were getting the language right and that we weren't going to have unintended consequences in the way that we word things, so that we can be confident that the work that we're doing here is clear and passes muster. So thank you to Devin for all of the behind the scenes work on this. Thank you, Chair. That was a lot, I know.
That was great. That was really, really helpful. Thank you. A+ on the presentation. I mean, I feel like I understand this a lot better. Awesome. Okay, before we move into Q&A and deliberation, can we hear public testimony, please?
Yes, we have one individual signed up, Terry Harris. And apologies to Terry, you were correct earlier. You were not signed up for the first item. You were signed up for this one. So just to clarify, no one is signed up to testify for document number 2026-054 and 055.
We just get extra Terry time.
Yeah, it's just a special treat for you all. Okay, so Terry Harris for the record. And real quickly, what you have before you is great. It is, worth the effort. But I'm going to talk about the inactivity thing a little bit and a way of rethinking it. And I gave you some written testimony, and along with the written testimony is a bunch of code language from other jurisdictions. And I think in the absence of something else, you do have sessions, and things do expire at the end of 2 years. because you're going to re-elect some of your members. Robert's rules says that any unfinished business expires when new folks come in. And if you think about it that way and realize that that happens every 2 years to sort of wash the docket clean, I think that might solve a lot of the problem that I think you're trying to solve. And so when I think about it that way, and then look through at the other jurisdictions, they do it that way, most of them. The only one that didn't there were a couple that didn't. San Francisco has an expiration, but they also have like a notice thing and some process that says before this expires, one last chance, do you want to bring this out of committee? Or do you want to act on this? Or are you sure you want this to expire? That sort of language might be helpful. And the other thing about it is the way it's set up is it's deemed inactive, but it doesn't say who is deeming it and what authority that happens. And I think either the council president has to deem it or the clerk has to deem it, and somebody has to keep track of those 180 days, which I think is an administrability issue. So in rethinking inactivity, I think maybe you can let Robert's rules do the work. Better would be to adopt a way to handle the expiration at the end of the 2 years, where you specifically can reintroduce things automatically with a new session, or weed them out at the last day of the last session. There are a number of ways different jurisdictions do it, and I gave them to you. I'm happy to think that through with you all if you want.
Thank you, Terry. We always appreciate your thoughts and for you to be here. Thank you. All right, were there any technical specific questions for Councilor Purtle-Guinea before we move into hearing about the pre-filed amendments from Councilor Dunphy? Councilor Clark?
Can I get her reaction to Terry's idea that they just kind of fade away after 2 years?
So a couple of thoughts and reasons that we didn't move in that direction. The first is, for whatever reason, we weren't given sessions, right? Our calendar doesn't work in that every 2 years after a new election, it's a new session way. We could move in that direction, but I was trying to not introduce extensive new overhauls like that. I do worry that if we expect this work to be ongoing and not have kind of the rush of a new session, right? You always have at the beginning of a body being seated anew, that like flurry of new things being introduced and where are we at? If we want things to be a little more stable across the cycle, I worry about things automatically coming to a close. I'm going to use the word dying. We used inactive here, but I'm just going to say dying. At the end of a 2-year term, what happens if something's introduced in November, right? We know that our process here is not always a speedy one. If you bring something to committee in November, it's heard in December, it's sent to full council, it's not going to get on the calendar until January, boom, it's dead. So I think we could include provisions to prevent against that, but this is now opening up a whole new body of work. How do we want our sessions, if you will, to run? What gets carried over, what doesn't? And I was not comfortable bringing that forward. I also think that if what we're trying to do is create more transparency for the public about what we're doing, 2 years is a long time. There are already, after 1 year, I think 3 or 4 things sitting in committees that I know are not going anywhere. Members of the public don't. And so I was trying to come up with a timeline that, based on the last year, felt like it would have captured the things that we spent the most time digging into, and not the things that that we don't want to be there. I'll note that it's 180 days from when something is initially placed on an agenda, not when it's introduced. So if something is placed on an agenda, we have a conversation, the clock starts then. So we're not in a rush to get it on an agenda and get moving. I do think it gives us enough time. As it relates to the who deems it inactive and what does that look like, it says here items deemed inactive will be placed on file by the clerk. And perhaps that wasn't clear enough. Our assumption in writing that was that the clerk, who right now keeps track of all of our deadlines and the technical behind the scenes back end pieces, would at 180 days move something to the inactive file. And on the technical end, right, that looks like a button that you click and it's no longer listed in a committee or available for agendas when you're doing your work of building your agenda with your clerk, things like that. Presumably, we would need to follow that up with having a space online where those things were filed, as well as having that filing paper copy for the records. But it would be the responsibility of the clerk's office as the body that keeps track of all of our deadlines and technical pieces now to do that.
Madam Chair, can I ask one more question? Then let me just make sure I understand this and that the public understands what you're saying, session versus not. Is that in our second year, something is introduced in November, you're advocating that it carry over into the next year, that it doesn't just drop off like a session. That I think that's what you're saying, right? So it stays alive into the next year.
That the way that our work currently moves, that happens. And I am suggesting that unless we have an extensive conversation about making a change there, we should keep that. The way that our body is set up, we are not a House of Representatives where everybody is up for election at the same time and you could potentially have a full overhaul. We will always have at least half of our body returning after an election year. So we will always have at least half of our body who has work that they are still continuing.
Perfect. Great questions. Thank you. Vice Chair Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to thank Councilor Perugini for bringing these forward. I recall those conversations. I love that you were meticulous and wanted to make sure that that just didn't drop, no matter how many days we're looking at right now. So I appreciate that. I think these changes you're bringing forward make really good sense, and I am going to support them. They move us closer to efficiency and time transparency with the public and consistency in practice. Personally, I really like the requirement of filing legislative amendments 24 hours notice for the full council, allowing for better informed discussion and voting. I find that when we do those on the dais and they are significant, they're not just housekeeping, which is a different category, it takes us away from bringing the public along on what we're voting along about. And it means that they'd have to, people that thought that we were voting on one thing, now we're voting on something perhaps much different than that. And they didn't have an opportunity to show up and testify. And so I just really like that from a good governance standpoint. 24 hours is still very quick. And to get that notice out is important. But it's much better than doing it the walk-ons. And I always go back to when I was heavily involved with the permit reforms and we looked at where some of the worst codes were written that caused people trying to work in Portland the biggest headaches. And there were so many pathways that would be to a walk-on amendment by the council. And that's not surprising. I also just want to say overall, the other things are pretty easy. The adoption of the handbook as a council tool. I kind of thought that already happened, but I like that you're formalizing that. And I just want to give thanks to you for, this isn't glamorous work when you're doing this type of policy. And I really appreciate that you hung in there and that you kept working on it to improve it. I did hear the testimony, and I understand that for Congress. I understand that for the Salem House. I don't get it yet for a municipality in local government. We're supposed to be nonpartisan. We're supposed to keep improving the oversight of the services that we have. And I don't know if I want to formalize that with having things die because there could be a change in the composite. So today I wouldn't be supportive of adding that. Thanks.
Put myself in the queue. I'm wondering, so I do feel overwhelmed when there are a lot of amendments flying around on the fly. I feel a little worried about limiting that because I'm not exactly sure how that limits our body. But one thing I'm wondering, if we do pass an amendment to an ordinance that's substantive, doesn't that mean that we have to like wait another week? Isn't that already one of our, like in the code that you have to, yeah, and how, yeah, can you respond to that?
Okay.
Next time we meet.
So ordinances can't be amended the day that they're passed. There is a period of time after an ordinance is amended before it can be passed. And that is presumably to allow for that review period. That's why we have two, right? We have a first reading and a second reading of an ordinance. But we often get amendments to other things that are substantive, right? While we talk about resolutions as less substantive because they don't go into our code, they're still very directive also and could include language that is not actually workable, but we don't find that out until after, or that conflicts with parts of code or conflicts with other resolutions that have been passed. Budget adjustments don't have that same wait period, I don't believe. So there are other things where I think that can be really important that are not code adjusting. There's that one protective piece right now around code. That still doesn't help us with making sure that we understand all of the implications before we vote on the amendment. It does make sure we don't pass the final without having those conversations.
That's helpful. So this part about the 24-hour deadline is more about, correct me if I'm wrong, non-ordinances, not code, being adjusted.
I think it's important for both so that we're able to receive feedback on the amendments themselves when possible. But I do think that it becomes even more important for those things that we can pass in the moment. Absolutely.
Councilor Clark?
Are we looking for comments on this now?
Yes, also knowing that Councilor Dunphy has 4 different amendments he's bringing to you.
Well, I would also like to express my appreciation. This is incredibly boring.
Yeah.
But
the nitty-gritty.
It's the nitty-gritty of how we operate. Everything's great. I think the code amendment piece that our chair just highlighted is really the crux of this. And to me, when I imagine trying to enforce this, it's really going to exact discipline on the part of the council because it can be really chaotic and really confusing for me. This requires that we take things a little more seriously, put a little more thought into it. And what's interesting is that there are outs that you can suspend the rules to get around this. The presiding officer can hold something over. So there's room for emerging issues. It's not, black or white, really. But I think it would be very interesting if we tried this to see if we can exact that kind of discipline on a very diverse and very engaged council. But I would like to support it, but I want to wait and hear what President Dunphy has to say, too. Thank you.
President Dunphy.
Thank you. First and foremost, Councilor Pertolini, thank you for doing this. Truly, a lot of this work is so clearly the result of the frustrations that you've had over the last year and the feedback you've gotten from our colleagues, and you are setting me up for a lot of success with this to try and find a whole new slate of nonsense to fix later. So absolutely, for the most part, I'm very, very supportive. I have a couple of amendments that are additive and are not really intended to tweak what you have done. And I have one amendment that is specific to the 24-hour rule, which I'm not totally sold on right now, but want to debate with all of you. I want to start with that one since we've been talking about that. I totally agree, Councilor Ryan, that the worst policy that comes out of City Hall is the amendments that are made on the fly. And that so much of our work has been cleaning up a lot of the really good intentions that were done without proper due diligence. The only concern I have really specifically is trying to be responsive to testimony that we are hearing on emergency ordinances or other things that where it is timely. And there is a backstop, obviously, of suspending the rules, which I think gets us most of the way there for most of the amendments that will ever come up. But I wonder, I guess I worry if the suspension of the rules, which requires 9 on what may end up being a vaguely controversial amendment, but would still be necessary to move something forward, might be too high of a bar. So for the purposes of conversation, Dunphy Amendment 3 adds a subsection to the amendments section. Specifically, it adds a little bit of language to 3.02.030.I.1. Specifically include, or this one is not to that item. This is specifically adding out items that were removed from the consent agenda, just calling that out. The second section calls out specifically amendments to ordinances and quasi-judicial decisions proposed for consideration being applicable for the 24-hour rule, with a dash or a dot A, a sub A, which would say that the 24-hour filing requirement for amendments may be waived for non-budget ordinances via majority vote to suspend the rules. I don't know if this would need us to change, would require additional work on that or not, but the idea being that specific to non-budget ordinances, a simple majority vote would allow us to suspend that rule to consider an amendment in less than 24 hours. Again, that's just on the table for consideration. Madam Chair, would you like me to go through my other amendments very quickly?
Do you have a preference? I was wondering, I think it is helpful if we can discuss each amendment individually.
Sure. Sure, so let's go one by one.
If we can go one by one, I think that would be great. And I'd entertain a motion if you want to officially.
Yeah, I would like to move Dunphy Amendment 3.
Okay, I'll second. But I'd also like to hear what Councilor Pertolini has to say about lowering the bar here to 7 from 9.
Chair, do you mind if I weigh in?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just checking, Council President, on the first piece. I think I see these as 3 distinct changes. And on the first one in 1, I am wondering if we need to add the language around removed from the consent agenda, because what A through F do is detail types of ordinances: non-emergency ordinance, emergency ordinance, franchise ordinance, resolution, report, and quasi-judicial land use decision. And all of those can be placed on the consent agenda, but once pulled off, they are still listed as that type of ordinance. So I actually think that may be redundant.
Okay.
I would look to, I don't think we have an attorney in the room, but if we can get an opinion that supersedes mine on this, that would be great. But from my reading, that's redundant.
Okay.
And I just wanted to flag that.
Great.
It looks to me like what you're doing is limiting the 24-hour rule to just ordinances and quasi-judicial decisions.
That was the direction I was moving, yes.
And I do think that having that protection for resolutions also is important. We have used resolutions in this body on some pretty important things. And in our direction to the mayor, I would like time to really thoroughly vet those. I actually think that on resolutions and emergency ordinances where we don't have the opportunity of a week before we vote, this can be even more important. I hear you on the need to be able to respond to public comment. Waiving this requirement by just a majority vote is in essence to me the same as not having this requirement at all. since a majority vote is what allows something to pass. So if we can waive this with the same votes that we would need to pass something, then it's kind of like we don't have this on the books in effect.
That's a good point.
So I am open to the idea of how we address public testimony when we have an emergency ordinance before us that we need to move quickly. I do have some concerns about doing it this way, though, and about limiting it.
That was really comprehensive. Yeah, I think I want to withdraw this amendment.
Can you, Counselor Pertolgini, explain? I saw all my other colleagues going, yeah, but I didn't quite understand why.
Okay, which piece?
The part of the 6, kind of making it a moot point, because don't you need 7?
So you're right. It says a majority. And I may have said 6. I think I meant more than 6. So let's use the word 7. Let me say this differently.
You do, okay.
Right now, an amendment can be adopted with 7 votes. If we said that there was this 24-hour period, and of course, like with anything else in code, that can be suspended with 9 votes, then we would essentially be saying you need to file things 24 hours in advance unless a supermajority of council thinks that it is that important. This would go back to saying you need to file things in advance unless 7 people think it's that important. Well, right now, I could say on any item, I don't think we should adopt this amendment because it hasn't been filed in advance, and 7 people could say, too bad, we want to pass it right now. That's a majority. So in effect, right, this puts the language on the books, which is a good step, but in effect, it doesn't actually change what we can do right now. Does that make more sense?
It does, and I think where I got confused is when my team read this and we were talking about it, they had said 6. And so 6 actually to me would make more sense, because you're right, if it's 7, then you have what you need. But I am curious, that lowers that even more, the number from 9 down to 6.
We need to raise our hand.
Yeah, just talk.
Well, I see, the president has his hand
No,
up.
I didn't mean to.
I just,
You formally withdraw?
I was saying aloud, I think I want to now, because I think that Councilor Pertolgini makes a really good point.
yeah, a little light bulb kind of went off over my head after hearing this. That I appreciate what you're trying to get at, but I think that 9 makes sense, that we have an out. So I think I'd prefer Councilor Pertolgini's language. It makes sense to me now, having this discussion. But I appreciate the effort.
Yeah.
I do think that, sometimes we do get really great testimony. We're thinking, but we can do a 9 persons.
What I will do is I will keep this one in particular in the front of my mind. And if we run into a problem in which in the future we cannot meaningfully respond to testimony in the moment, and there's a reason for that, then I'll be bringing something back to council for consideration. I would like to move to withdraw my amendment, Amendment W3.
Thank you.
With permission from
Withdrawing all of 3 or just the second
Just this
part?
one.
the whole 3, all of 3, the 3 separate things. I am convinced that that Councilor Pertolgini said that the first item there, items removed from the consent agenda, is redundant. I'm convinced that there are circumstances in which items outside of ordinances and quasi-judicial decisions may be applicable. And I hear the fact that functionally a bare majority vote to suspend the rules is functionally no rule at all. And so I would like to withdraw everything on the page that says Dunphy Amendment 3 and go back to the drawing board.
Can I just offer another comment? I think it will be really interesting to see if we can exact that kind of discipline on the part of the council. To slow everything down, be more self-conscious about what we're trying to accomplish.
It does because of that, Councilor Cook, and when you said this earlier, I thought of this. It seems like a big jump for us. So I am worried about making this big of a jump and having it apply to ordinances, resolutions. So if you all are supporting it, and I think this will be an interesting conversation when it goes to full council. I wonder what that conversation will be like. But I think probably the way it's written, I will not be able to support the whole thing because of that part. But I also think that that's okay. We can have more conversations. And that's kind of how it's supposed to work. We're supposed to kind of workshop it. All right. Councillor Dunphy, did you want to put something else?
Yeah, could I please move Dunphy Amendment 1 before I move it formally? I'd like to just read what it is. This is a change to 3.02.020 subsection B 1A1. Specifically, this changes the language to basically everywhere that we physically could to include the phrase including a committee of the whole. This is at the recommendation of the city attorneys to make sure that our language about quorum and attendance are met with the intention of what I intend to be bringing to propose for our new committees. So specifically, it is just changing the title rather from general to designation to a committee, and then including a comma, including committee of the whole 3 different times. And I would move Dunphy Amendment 1 and would love a second.
Second.
So we were all like ready to second that.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, colleagues. Let's discuss Dunphy 1. Councillor Purtle-Guinea.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Council President, for moving this forward. I know Committee of the Whole is a direction that you're hoping to go. I want to divide my comments some and start with saying I really like the second piece of what you've brought, page 3, where you're clarifying that we can have a Committee of the Whole and clarifying the membership requirements to make sure that that stands. I think that was an oversight when we created these membership requirements and a really important piece to include here if we want to be able to have a Committee of the Whole. And I appreciate that you caught that because it's not something that I had caught when I did my review. I think that the piece around emergency ordinances and ordinances relating to council rules going to the Committee of the Whole is fine, though I do think that it has the potential to limit us in the future if we decide that we don't want a Committee of the Whole. A future council president might not create that committee, and I worry that that boxes us in a little bit. I also would suggest that for you and for our future leadership, we've had a lot of conversations as a group about the power of the council president and whether we should have a more or less powerful council president. And I think we frankly landed somewhere in between functionally. One of the places where the council president has the least power on this council is in determining where pieces of legislation move. And some people might advocate that the council president should have that power in order to put things where they want it and control their destiny. But the other piece that is important in regulating where things move is making sure that committees and council have the time to do their work. Because right now, if everybody brings forward legislation requesting the same committee, neither our council president nor that committee chair have any power to say, I'm getting bogged down. And I worry, Council President, that in allowing all of us to choose to send our things directly to Committee of the Whole, you may bog yourself down in your ability to get things through the Committee of the Whole. And I would advocate, if folks here are interested in it and if the Council President is open to it, to removing these first 2 designations of Committee of the Whole under 3.02020B1A1, A and B. These are on page 1. In order to not bog down our work, but retaining the designations later, I'm willing to accept page 2, even though I think it could box in a future council president to having to have a Committee of the Whole. Maybe we could change that to say a Committee of the Whole or a work session of the full council. That would give some more flexibility. And I'm definitely supportive of page 3. And I would be interested in council president or anybody else's feedback on that.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Great feedback, absolutely. The the concern I have about specifically the first two, my understanding was specifically just to call out that a committee of the whole does exist, but I do recognize that maybe it won't in the future. But also to, my understanding was that my team worked with some of the advice from the city attorney's office to make sure that we are being explicit about that because of other parts of the code where we talk about quorum rules and public meetings. And so by specifying that the committee of the whole is included as the list of opportunities in this, that would protect us in some way. But and I think it really was more, I mean, I do see also that you are, I mean, yes, there's potentials for bogging down everywhere. And with regard to these first ones under 1A1A and 1A1B, it does feel largely just sort of redundant for the purposes of having it in there, but it does make me more comfortable having it in there, even if it is a little bit much. A little bit, yeah. Sorry, and I'm mostly just thinking out loud now. Would you want to, are you looking to divide the question on this?
I'd hope to hear, I'm sorry, Chair, may I respond? I'd hope to hear feedback from others first, but if it's helpful for discussion, I am happy to divide the question. Council President, what do you think of the idea of saying on page 2 under B1AF, a committee of the whole or a work session of the full council in order to give future leaders a little more flexibility there? Would that be friendly or not friendly?
I would certainly accept that. However, as I understand it, we have some conversation with our council clerk about how friendly amendments work, and that we have to actually just vote that as a separate amendment into an amendment.
I thought that was just in full council. I apologize.
Sure.
Okay, I'm just trying to decide if I divide this into 2 or 3 different pieces. Is it helpful if we divide it into 3 just to take each of those sections separately?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so Chair, I would move to divide the question by pages, actually, page 1, page 2, and page 3 here.
Great. And we don't need to do anything to divide the question,
We're
right?
looking at Dunphy Amendment 1, which is posted online.
Dunphy Amendment 1 is posted in 2 sections. The first section is 2 pages, and the second section is page 3.
Okay. So clerk, we are discussing page 1 of Dunphy 1.
Oh, you're good. This is how we do this. It's great.
And it was to divide the question? Okay.
And so in terms of dividing the question, I'd like to move the items on page 3 first. These are the changes to 3.02.050.A1 and C1 and C2. This is the addition, the addition of the phrase, including a committee of the whole under the section titled Formation, and under the committee titled, or the section titled Membership would read committees, comma, other than the committee of the whole must be composed of less than a quorum of council, and then erases a committee generally consists of 4 to 6 councilors, and then adds the word committees to the sentence, a committee's quorum is the majority of the committee members. I'd like to move to debate on that and then move that first.
Councilor Clark, are you in the queue to debate Dunphy Amendment 1, page 1?
Page 3. Page 3.
Page 3. So we're starting with 3?
I'd like to start with
Oh, we're
page 3.
sitting in the back on
Yeah,
3.
the last one, the last part of Dunphy 1.
Yep.
I'll come home. Oh, okay. Making sure. I'm confused.
I'm more interested in page 1, B1,
Yeah.
BA1. I'm fine with page 3.
And I apologize, Chair Quayama-Lane, did we have a motion in a second?
Oh, I moved Dunphy 1. And I think Clark moved second.
To divide the question?
I moved to divide the question.
Okay,
Do I need a second for that,
that's correct.
Okay, second.
Thank you.
Clark?
Thanks, Diego.
But we don't need to vote on it, right?
We need to vote on each of these separate now.
We don't need to vote on dividing the question. The question is divided, and now we're looking at Dunphy 1, page 3. Okay. Colleagues, it looks like we don't need to are we ready to vote?
Sure.
Diego, will you please call the roll on Amendment Dunphy 1, page 3?
Dunphy,
Aye.
Pertlegany,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Koyamaline.
Aye.
With 5 ayes, the amendment is approved.
Excellent.
And Councillor Dunphy, are we discussing page 1? Okay, so now we are in discussion, colleagues, on Dunphy 1, page 1.
Specifically, the item submission, any councilor, committee of the council, mayor, or auditor may submit an item, a procedure, and then that is the next 3 things. So it is changing the title to designation to committee and including the phrase, including a committee of the whole twice.
Councillor
And
Clark?
I'd like to, yeah, go.
Oh, yeah.
No, go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So so long ago, now I'm a little confused, but I think I'm worried about this, that any counselor may present a proposal or may designate a committee for review, including the committee of the whole. I'm just concerned that we're going to bypass the substantive committees. And that's what worries me about this particular one. I'm all for the committee of the whole being included, but this seems like, I'm going to bypass the committee, I don't like it, and I'm going to go. It seems like the committee of the whole is really a place to discuss, educate, not to move your thing. I don't know, does that make sense to you?
You know, I envision it as being a number of items, even if it were, for example, very specifically around transportation. If there is an item of high enough interest among counselors that all 12 of us need to have that debate before we get to a full council, I think that it should be able to be moving towards it. I don't like the idea of it being a bypass of the main council. And admittedly, again, I will be unveiling a proposal around what the committee of the whole will be. We haven't even gotten to that point yet. But the expectation also is that if something is voted on at the committee of the whole, it may almost certainly go to the consent agenda for the full council, unless there is a good, compelling reason to have it public testimony again. So I hear the concern for sure about potentially bogging it down or letting folks get a second bite of the apple sort of idea. I also don't love broadly not having the president have any real control of that, but yeah, that's where we are.
Anything else? Councillor Pertlegany.
I'm just looking at the actual language here. Any counselor may designate a committee for review. And under our current practices, if a counselor chooses to designate a committee for review, the council president does not have the ability to force them to choose a different committee. The council president can use the power of persuasion to try to convince them to choose something different. But that decision is final. A counselor does, though, have the option to not designate a committee for review. And when that happens, the council president can choose. So by including committee of the whole, we are allowing a counselor to choose that. If we took it out and a counselor brought forward a proposal that fit within the policy areas that you, council president, want to have go to committee of the whole, in effect, what would happen is that counselor would not designate a committee for review and then have a conversation with you, presumably about you using that opening to send it to committee of the whole. So I do think things would still go to committee of the whole from counselors, not just from the administration this way. It would just be in coordination with you and a decision to not designate a different committee for review.
Great. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure I understood that.
That was really helpful. So I think Councilor Perdulgini is saying right now how it's worked according to code and how it's been for the last over a year. When a councilor says, I'd like it to go to this committee, it needs to go there. And the council president can try to persuade it to go to another committee, but that's what code says. So this having committee of the whole here is saying if a councilor says, I want it to go to committee of the whole, it has to go there, which is, I think, what you were saying. If we take this out,
Essentially, if we leave the language as it currently stands.
then if a counselor says, I would like it to go to community and public safety, and council president or you talk to this counselor and say, hey, actually, can we do committee of the whole, and they agree, then that works. Or if they put no preferred committee, there's also an opening there. So that does make me lean to thinking that maybe we don't need this specific language here.
Yeah, well, I will note that a significant portion of what I envision the committee of the whole to be is also a combination of governance and finance issues. And so I do think there needs to be a way for consistent referral of those items that would otherwise be going to governance or finance to be able to be referred to a committee rather than each of those being an individual conversation with me. But I also I can see the argument that by saying may designate a committee for review, and the committee of the whole is an option under the committee structure in each council, or it would be in the future, it may just be redundant.
Good. Councilor Clark, are you still? Councilor Perdulgini.
That's an interesting point, that actually it may be redundant, and if we take it out, it may still do the same thing that Councilor Clark was raising concerns about, because it would be listed as a committee. And I think the question that I have, I guess, Council President, is if we have a committee of the whole, I presume, I might be incorrect, that the description of that committee will be broader than just governance and finance, even if that's your intent for what the bulk of the work is.
Yeah.
Right now, the only thing kind of keeping us on track in terms of what goes where is those committee descriptions. So we have a bit of a bind. If you would like our colleagues to be able to choose committee of the whole, and the description is broader, we could each choose it for everything. I could bring this, well, I guess this is governance, so it would go straight there, but we could all bring all of our things there, and that's the bogging down that I think Councilor Clark and I at least are concerned about, perhaps others.
Yeah.
And I wonder how we make sure, either through our code language or through the committee descriptions, that we don't do that. Do we need to say something actually completely different that neither of us thought about in my proposal or your amendments, saying that a counselor may present a proposal and may designate a committee for review, presuming that that committee's description aligns with the policy that they are bringing? Do we need to have something actually narrowing here? Or do we just want to leave it be, and you can this year use your power of persuasion to have it look the way you're hoping, and we can hope that we start over time to set a precedent of what goes and what doesn't?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Would it help at all if we moved, if it said, or indicate no preferred committee to request committee of the whole? Some sort of language to specify that there needs to be a request.
I don't want to, I don't want to wing it right now, and we will have to bring this to the full council. And I think you're right that there needs to be more consideration of this. I think that I'm at this point now convinced that largely I still like titling it designation to committee, but the inclusion of this does feel potentially just redundant at this point and doesn't have other built-in protections that empower the counselor or the council president to make those decisions. So for now, I think I'd like to just move to a vote on this. If it passes, great. If it doesn't, great. And then maybe have further consideration on it with some more time to think about how we land on this. Unless we want to keep workshopping this for multiple governance hearings. But yeah.
Counselor Ryan?
Thank you very much for bringing this, President Dunphy. I've been a big advocate for committee of the whole, so I think because I saw the exclamation points with that, I wanted to support it. And now I'm at a place where I don't think it's necessary. And I also think this might be a different conversation in a couple months because there are a couple of committees that will be seen in that regard. So I would support workshopping this a little bit, pulling it at this moment, because I think we're all trying to get to the same place, but I'm concerned that right now, hypothetical, I would just probably want to bring everything to the committee of the whole based on this and not really use committees.
Yeah.
And I know that's not what you intended from writing this. So I will not be supporting this, even though I like the idea behind it. Thanks.
Great.
Counselor Purtle-Guinea?
Thank you, Chair. I would propose that we amend Dunphy 1, page 1, to retain the change from general to designation to committee in the subsection title, but remove the additions of the words including a committee of the whole, comma, in both sub A and sub B.
Would that be the fastest way to, or would amending it, or would it just be dividing the question again and just we just vote on retitling that, and if everybody wants to vote down the other parts of it, that's okay.
I'm fine with either approach. I'm just trying to get us to the change that you want there and more time to work on the other pieces.
I'd love to divide the question to retitle this one section as designation to committee.
Second?
Second. So you divided that from the other.
So now it is literally just, we're going to retitle.
Now we're discussing Dunphy 1, page 1, just the retitling of B1A1 from general to designation to committee. Anyone in the queue to discuss that specifically?
Okay, it's going to read what?
Designation to committee instead of general. Right?
That's what you're proposing, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll do that.
So-
We'll move on from the next, we'll get rid of the references to, or we'll independently vote, and it sounds like we'll vote down the other part of this amendment, but I do like that part.
So Diego, will you call the roll on Dunphy 1, page 1, only the title being changed from designation to committee?
Counselor? Yes. Sorry, I just jumped in the queue.
Sorry about that.
Okay, it's my fault. Am I okay to go?
Yeah.
Sorry, colleagues, I just wanted 30 seconds to actually look at this full section outside of the amendment and make sure that it doesn't do anything more than the designation to committee and that actually works without it being general. So we have the designation, we have a committee, what a committee can do with it. We have what happens if it's not referred to a committee, and then emergency ordinances. I think that could all fit loosely. There's some that fit more tightly than others, but I think it all could loosely fit. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for that extra 30
Good
seconds.
to look into that. All right. Clerk, are you ready to call the roll?
Yes. Dunphy,
Aye.
Purtle-Guinea,
Aye.
Ryan,
I think I'm following what we're voting on right now. Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Kayama Lane.
Aye.
With 5 ayes, the motion carries.
I
Should I just withdraw the other two?
I want to ask a question about this, though.
Practicing the walk-on amendments right now.
Yeah.
Just wanted everyone to know that.
I actually talked about that in preparing for this. Did I catch correctly that my colleagues, you were saying that even without what Councillor Dunphy is proposing to add here, councillors will have the ability to direct something to committee of the whole? Okay, so we're recognizing that we might need to come back and clean that up. Okay. All right, now I'm ready if you'd like to withdraw that.
Yeah, Diego,
Do you want to talk about it, Councillor Clark?
I was saying, can I withdraw the remainder of the amendment at this point?
So just so I'm tracking, I'm if I may suggest naming them Dunphy 1.1, 1.2, et cetera.
Okay.
And if I'm understanding correctly, that would be to withdraw 1.3 and 1.4?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, if as we're going down the road, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, and then page 3 is considered Dunphy 1.5. If we're looking at every red line as a sub-bullet. We just voted on 1.1. I would like to withdraw 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. And we already voted on what in this new scheme would be called 1.5.
So Dunphy 1 is off the table. All of it.
The remainder of
Remainder
it,
of
the
it,
parts that
okay.
we did not vote on.
So now we are discussing the underlying. Yes, Councilor
Oh,
Clark?
no, I still have 2 other amendments.
Yes,
So
until you put those on the table.
can I make a comment, though? You're withdrawing that, Council President. I just wanted to say that I thought the second part was okay. B, I thought B was okay.
Oh.
But we're not going to do it today. I understand that you're going to continue to massage this, or workshop, as we say.
Yeah.
But just, yeah, okay. Just had to get that out there.
This obviously needs a little bit more thought, so.
Did you have another amendment that you'd like to introduce?
I think I just inadvertently created a pause there, Chair. I'm sorry. I was looking at what Councillor Clark was talking about, which was the difference between A, where a councillor in Dunphy 1, A, where a councillor can send something to a committee, and B, where the council president sends something. And Councillor Clark was mentioning wanting to make sure that we actually did include that second piece, which was, I think,
And I think it's still implied. Because their committee of the whole will be an option of which I can designate a committee for review.
for what it's worth, if I may, if reading what's not there creates intent as much as reading what's there, if we included including a committee of the whole in B, might that create an intent that the council president had that ability, but individual councilors did not, and give us at least a cleaner place to start from as you do the rest of the work, Councillor Dunphy?
Oh, that's really interesting.
I
Yeah.
wonder if it's actually cleaner if we move Dunphy 1.3 also, per Councillor Clark's
Great.
suggestion there.
1.3,
That's a
which is,
policy.
Can I move it? Okay, I would like to move that then.
Great.
Dunphy 1, it would be B 1A.
Yeah, we'll call that Dunphy 1.3.
A1B.
B.
Yeah, so A1B. Yeah.
A1B.
Diego, are you following on that?
That was 1.3A.
When,
Yeah, we would be
B.
the B section. So this would, again, if we're going 1.1, 1.2, this would be including 1.3, which is an addition of the phrase including a committee of the whole to subsection B, right there on the first page.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second.
Okay.
And was there a motion, was that from Vice President Clark?
Yes.
The motion? Okay, thank you.
If there's not any further discussion on Dunphy 1B, and that is where it reads, if not designated for a particular committee's review by the counselor who proposed an item, or if proposed by the mayor or auditor, the president may designate a committee for review, including committee of the whole, or designate the item for consideration by the full council.
Yeah.
So specifying if you do not pick a committee, committee of the whole will be an option.
President may,
Okay.
she said, yeah, I like that.
All right. Diego, will you please call the roll on that teeny tiny amendment within the amendment?
Dunphy,
Aye.
Bertolini,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Cleama Lane.
Aye.
With 5 ayes, the amendment is accepted.
Councilor Dunphy, did you want to introduce another amendment?
I've got a note from my team about F, so sorry, I'm trying to very quickly read that. But sorry. Okay, Dunphy Amendment 2 is about clarifying discharge petitions. This adds it tweaks the language at the end of 3.02.020 .b it's a ways down there, .1.a.1.e. Specifically, it would strike and add language so that section E would read, when an item has been assigned to a committee, any 4 counselors may require in writing that the item be considered by the full council, which has the same effect as a referral to the full council. And if a committee votes not to refer an item to full council, it is deemed inactive and will be placed on file by the council clerk. This is specifically to try and clarify that while we have a discharge petition, if an item is stuck in committee and not being scheduled by the chair, that is a different action than a discharge after a vote that did not go your way. This is to clarify that if a committee votes on your bill and the committee says no, that you cannot then turn around and refile, or you can refile it, but you couldn't sign a discharge petition for a bill that the committee has deemed not to move forward. You don't follow, sorry.
Okay, so if we have an example,
Sure.
if something is voted down in finance, but there are 4 other counselors that really wanted that to go to the full council, they can't bring that item, but they could refile it again and bring it.
Right.
Okay, so does this also mean that an item wouldn't have to go to committee at all and 4 counselors can force it to the full council? Because I think that would be good for that to be clarified. I've heard different counselors having some different opinions there. I think already we're not quite sure if that is.
It wasn't my intention that this is specifically a tool to get something directly on the full council, but rather to clarify the question of whether, say, for example, that this committee votes no on this policy, but then Councilor Purtle-Guinea gets 3 other people to join her and puts it back to life. That wouldn't be allowed under the current plan. That a committee voting something down is, in fact, a final step in that process. And if Councilor Purtle-Guinea wanted to refile this document and either move it to the full council or a different committee, that is a path forward. But rather, once the committee has taken an action, that action is final.
And I kind of like the idea of 4 counselors being able to revive or undead or bring to life something. Yeah, but this is interesting. Okay, Councilor Purtle-Guinea.
Thank you, Chair. Council President, I am not opposed to the change you're trying to make here and what you're trying to clarify, but I want to talk through just so I understand on the front end. So I see 3 possible places where counselors could want to pull something from a committee. Once something has been sent to a committee and before it's scheduled, to essentially bypass the committee, right? I had to send this to a committee. The council president said I had to. I want it to go to full council, so I'm going to use this as a tool to do that. I do believe that somewhere in here we create some deadlines by which a chair has to put something on a committee agenda, so things can't languish forever. The second, so there is a backstop there, but it is a little longer. It does allow things to languish for a little bit. The second period of time would be a chair puts something on an agenda, and then either we run out of time so we don't get to it, the chair pulls it off an agenda, there's a discussion, but there's not a vote, and then it kind of languishes. Possibly if we pass these changes for 180 days, possibly if we don't pass these changes indefinitely, or if we invoke Robert's rules at the 2-year mark. So that's the second place where I think this is actually really important. And then the third is after something is voted down, which is what you're trying to make sure we're not using this for. I agree with you on that third one. I worry that this creates an opening for the first one, where if a chair just hasn't had time to get to something yet, people use this as an excuse to pull everything to full council. And I'd love to offer language if folks are interested in how we could narrow that first part so that this really is focused on the chair puts something on a committee agenda. They've fulfilled their requirement. They have 180 days to put it on a committee agenda, but then they just let it, or 90 days, I apologize, 90 days to put it on a committee agenda, but then they just let it languish and they never bring it to a vote. And they're being heavy-handed and not letting something come to a vote and narrowing this to be used for that type of situation. So I put that out there to see what folks think. I did write down some potential language. I'm sorry I didn't see these until this morning, so I couldn't file it 24 hours in advance.
I don't think I thought it.
Where we could narrow the first part if folks are interested in that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can we get a motion to discuss Dunphy too?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, colleagues.
Madam Chair, for the purposes of helping me, whose brain is kind of mushy right now, could I ask my staff to come up and help me clarify some of the things that I did not say particularly eloquently?
Sure, come on up. State your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Eben Judith Hoffer, policy support for Councillor Jamie Dunphy. Just to clarify, so we've had some back and forth with the city attorney on under what circumstances can this 4-vote rule be invoked. And their current, what they've expressed to us is that in any of those 3 situations, prior to something being scheduled, if it has been held indefinitely or continued without a vote, or if it has been voted on and voted down. In any of those situations, under the current language, a councillor can invoke subsection E here and send something to full council. So that's my understanding of what the current situation is. You can, as Councillor Pertle-Guinea said, you can just use 4 votes and leapfrog council once assigned, committee once assigned before something's been scheduled. What this amendment would not change that. What it would say is if something is voted down just on the administrative end, that item would go away and you'd start a new item if you wanted to send something back to full council, which inside the e-council world would make things a little simpler. Did I make things easier or harder? I apologize.
Councilor Pertle-Guinea is giving you a thumbs up.
Great, I'll stick.
I have a question though. I think
Yes.
you made it easier, but I have a question.
Yes.
So when you say they'd have to restart the clock, if you will, like it was voted down, so they just couldn't take that and then repurpose it and bring it to get in enough, like 4 signatures to bring it to full council, what does that mean? Does it mean they just restart it with new names on it? And even though they're keeping all the same language because they still want that to be passed?
Exactly. So you think of it, if any time something was voted down in committee, whether or not there was the anticipation of it being filed, then it would just stay in that committee's inactive queue sort of indefinitely, maybe 180 days, maybe 2 years, depending on what this body decides. What this change would say is like, okay, once it's voted down, it stops. You can always file a new item with the same content and then reassign it to committee or come forward with 4 signatures to send it to full council. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
But when you first said it, you had to ask this question to make sure you understood that it could still be the same legislation.
Yes.
It's just being resubmitted with new sponsors and coming to the committee as a whole.
Same content, different item. Exactly. So you could refile the same.
Item, not different content of the previous item that failed in a committee.
Correct.
Now that same item that failed in the committee can be a new item, of course, because we established that with new sponsors, and then it comes to the committee of whole.
Not
Refer
necessarily.
to full council, yes.
It just would be reintroduced.
Or to the full council.
For a second. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, same thing.
Yeah.
Evan, is this what the city attorney is saying? This is clarifying his interpretation of how things are now? Or is this changing?
This is really just responsive to conversations with the clerk. about what it means for when things are voted down in committee for them to sort of be in an administrative gray space after that, sort of indefinitely. So this wouldn't change anything about the current practice, except it would just end that administrative item after that vote.
And my guess-
everything else stays the same.
My guess is that this is coming up because in our past, a little over a year, we have maybe our first item that some counselors are thinking about for kind of doing that override. So this is clarifying, is the question that you're going to revive something that was dead, or are you making a new one and then just sending it to full council? Is that
Right, exactly. Do
understanding
you
that?
get to continue that thing on to full council, or do you just go back to the beginning and do it a different way?
But it's not really dead, you're just cloning. I mean, it's the same
You
item.
wouldn't want to go back to the
You're
same
cloning,
committee
yeah.
because
You're cloning it.
the action will be the same,
Okay.
right? I mean, presumably.
Yep. And we have 4 more minutes. Is anyone else wanting to discuss Dunphy 2? Counselor Clark, are you in the queue to discuss Dunphy 2, the clarifying discharge petition?
Well, I'm not sure where I am on this
Yeah.
at this point.
Counselor Ryan?
But it
Oh,
sounds
sorry.
like it's a Scribner's thing. It's like if it dies in committee, the clerk just wants it to go away, not it hangs out there. And the clerk wants it to be reintroduced in some other form, right? Start over again, not have it hanging around.
If ordinance number 5 gets voted on by this committee and this committee says no, ordinance 5 is gone. But if I come tomorrow and I file ordinance number 6 and it's the exact same language,
Right.
the process starts again.
But then what happened, does it go back to a committee or?
Well, it would be referred to either, as with the earlier thing in here, it said, it would be either with a preferred committee by the filer, no committee preference, or could go to a full council, or it could be, and there's further work that still needs to be decided about what items come to a full council versus skipping the committee. And I'd like to make sure we do some work on that to clarify what that pattern is, because I don't want to just bypass committees. But in theory, if my new item 6 comes in and I can send it, instead of sending it to governance, I send it to finance for a different conversation, that's a new item with the same language inside of it.
Okay. I'm not sure where I am on
But
this.
there's nothing currently, the current rules would allow us to do that same practice.
Yes, but also the current rules are unclear if, in this hypothetical ordinance, if ordinance 5 could come back to life. And from the clerk's perspective, when a committee votes no on something, it goes away. But this would to discharge, or to file a discharge petition means that the clerk's gonna have to hold on to every no voted document that we've ever had. And this would just re-clarify that you come in anew. And in theory, because this is sort of a gray area, anything that has ever been voted no by any committee or the body could be revived, and that's a pretty obnoxious rule to be allowed to play.
Vice Chair Ryan?
I think, I can't figure out what the problem is we're solving with the current rules that we have. We could still do that. I know there's a recent vote that went down 3-2 in arts and economy that I just assumed 4 people on the council would try to bring this to the full council. And so they could still do that, but what this would do, it's kind of like a housekeeping thing. It would allow that committee to formally know that they did vote it down and it didn't come from them. And that we need this administrative policy, which feels more like an administrative policy, to clean that up. Is that what we're talking about right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if we want to be more explicit, if that policy that failed 3-2 at arts and economy, my preferred way and the council clerk's preferred way would be to have that become a new ordinance with the same subject. Even the same language would be
It's the
accepted.
same thing.
Yeah, just we don't want to continue to revive zombies.
Oh, I did get a note earlier that this is what Keelan prefers.
I get it from a cleanliness standpoint.
Yeah. Counselor Pertolini.
Counselor Dunphy, I mentioned this early on, but I'll just say the language out loud. Would you be open to this saying, after an item has been assigned to a committee and placed on an agenda, any 4 counselors may require in writing that the item be considered by the full council, and then so on to the language that you added? So that instead of when, after an item has been assigned to a committee and placed on an agenda,
Yeah.
any 4 counselors, and what that would do is ensure that a committee has to at least take a bite at something first. You can't just send to a committee in order to have that administrative box checked and then do the poll without trying to work it in committee first. That this is really about something not getting the work and time that it deserves in committee. Would you be open to that as an amendment to your amendment?
I would be open to that as an amendment to an amendment, yes.
Okay.
And I did want to clarify that the language that Dana gave me was that Keelan is supportive. I think I said she prefers. I'm not sure what she prefers, but I was told that she is supportive.
She's not here.
Yep.
And so I would,
But Dana is here.
I just don't think this is ready to vote because I get what we're talking
On the whole
about.
thing
And
or on
I
the-
think that we're maybe supposed to have this conversation, but for me to hear from the council clerk would be really helpful.
And we are at 4:30. If we want to carry this over, I'm
Yeah.
certainly comfortable with it.
I just think we have to make sure that this is really ready to vote on. And I don't feel comfortable voting on this until I hear from the council clerk.
Keelan, are you online? I just got a note saying you're here.
Oh,
There she
Well, look,
is.
there's the council clerk.
Hi, all. It's good to see you.
Can you give us some of your opinion, thoughts, advice about Dunphy 2 clarifying the discharge petition?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Quayamaline. Hi, committee members. I actually, everything that Councilor Dunphy has said it reflects what we have talked about. And I think, like, I understand where Councilor Ryan is coming from. And I think the only thing I would add is that from our office's perspective, when an item is not referred out of committee to full council, we understand that item to have died in committee. So we are looking at how we can appropriately disposition that item to reflect that action that the committee has taken. So that's kind of where we're looking at. Once that item gets voted down, we are then going to place it on file as part of that permanent record with our agenda or with our document archive system. And then if there is a desire by one or more counselors to have that item revisited by the body, by either at committee or full council or a committee of the whole, that item would then just be filed again as another item to be considered, as though it were a brand new item.
Thank you, Keelan. Councilor Pertolgini, we have a couple more minutes. Diego has confirmed that we could go a couple more minutes, and then we're going to probably carry the main chunk of this, the item, to the next meeting, but go ahead.
I would like to propose this amendment that I just ran by Councilor Dunphy. Chair, I just sent this to you so you can get it to the appropriate people. In the first line of Councilor Dunphy's amendment, it currently says when an item has been assigned to a committee. I am proposing an amendment to the amendment that would replace when with the word after and add after the word committee and placed on an agenda, so that it would then read, after an item has been assigned to a committee and placed on an agenda, comma, any 4 counselors may require in writing that the item be considered by the full council, which has the same effect as a referral to the full council. If a committee votes not to refer an item to full council, it is deemed inactive and will be placed on file by the council clerk. This would ensure that committees aren't used as a checkbox stop, to actually get things to full council, and that we give a real attempt at doing the work in committee, but allow that escape valve so that if a chair puts something on an agenda to meet that administrative timeline, but isn't allowing true time for debate or for something to come forward to a vote, that release valve of 4 counselors is still an effective tool.
And did you make a motion?
I am moving this amendment. Yes.
Second.
Thank you.
Is anyone in the queue to debate?
Yeah, I have a quick question about
go
it. Well, so, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that committee chairs have a timeline requirement to schedule something for an agenda? Couldn't a committee chair, once an item is assigned to a committee, the chair has to, isn't under the same timeline obligations, right? As the, yeah, sorry, you hear what I'm saying.
Currently, there is no deadline for committees. If we adopt the ordinance before us on page 17 of 21, under 3.02050D rules, we are adding a sub 1 that says a committee chair or co-chairs must place items that have been referred to their committee on an agenda in a timely manner not to exceed 90 days, which parallels the language that is applied to the council president for the full council.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing this conversation to go on, and thank you, staff, for allowing us to go a little bit over. And I do think it's clear this is going to be brought up, hopefully, as the first item at the next meeting. I think when we spoke with the council clerk, thank you so much for weighing in. I heard clarity from us about when we vote something down that it's done, and I want to kind of decouple that from then what action do you take then to bring something that happened to on, but having them commingled is perhaps where I'm having trouble. Because what I heard from her is that their office needs clarity on not allowing things to be voted down just to sit there forever. And I can appreciate that as a neatnik. So, but the next step is something that I think we need more dialogue about. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor. Is anyone else in the queue to debate the motion? Okay, Diego, will you please quickly call the roll then?
On what?
On the motion that's on the table that,
The amendment to the amendment, which I proposed and Councilor
Yes.
Dunphy seconded. Did you send that language to the clerk and the full
did.
committee?
Thank you.
Dunphy too.
Have it read, please.
Ready to go.
So Councilor Ryan's asking for it to be read. So the first word, instead of when, it is now after an item has been assigned to a committee, and then it has been added in and placed on an agenda.
Wait, do we have to do that opposite? Don't we have to vote on the amendment, my amendment, and then amend the amendment?
I think we vote to amend the amendment first, and then we vote to adopt the
think so.
amendment.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
it's like you take the details and go back up here.
Okay.
All right, will you please call the roll?
Dunphy.
Aye.
Pertolini.
Aye.
Ryan.
Is that an I or an oi? I.
Clark.
Okay.
Koyama Lane.
Aye. And without further objection, we will carry this item over to a further committee meeting. Thank you for everyone's patience. We have more work to do on here. Thank you, everyone. Our next meeting will be Monday, February 23rd. I'll now adjourn this meeting of the Governance Committee.
Thanks.